friends. My name is Host Eric. I'm host of Talking to Fans People. I've titled this live stream appropriately, OMG, how satisfying. And on so many levels, it is satisfying. Because, like, just in terms of people understanding, the reality of things right, versus just seeing the final product of it, it's very satisfying. Like, a lot of times I make videos where I'm explaining something that I've understood for a long time and explained for a long time. And I'm fighting against intransigent wrongness in a way that does not indicate any sense at all of what's going to be effective for anything at all. Or a total not caring about one of the two. This time, though, this is different. Because we all started in exactly the same place. And everybody who was around here at all during the original conversation of this subject can, can attest to the fact can attest to the fact that I was as confused as anybody. I was flummoxed. I had no answers at all, and I didn't think it was determinate on the question that I thought it was evidence about. I was I was right. It wasn't determinate regarding that. I was wrong that it was evidence about that at all. But I was like, well, that's the best argument I've ever heard in favor of AI having FI. No, you cannot. Nobody's coming over tonight. Anyway, I was in the shower and I was puking a little bit, not that much puking, because I ate a lot of mushrooms today. And as I was puking there, it struck me in a flash the answer, the answer, the correct answer for something that had confused me and everybody else at the time completely. And it should have been so obvious the whole time. Should have been so obvious the whole time. We were all seeing that as, including the studiers, as an expression of interest of some kind. But in fact, they are not an expression of interest at all. Otherwise, they wouldn't be calculations of morality. And what's happening there is not a problem of AI disobeying people. It's a problem of it's in fact, if anything, the AI is not disobeying more because people are not giving it instructions that behave as though the things they want are uh, are only considered after first order questions like moral questions. So indeed, AI is necessarily unavoidably a moral agent. Now um, we could try to extract from it somehow. I don't even know how you would go about doing this, but it's the same kind of thing that gives it actual agency in the world, namely capacity to actually do things that are independent of people telling you what to do, right? Well, that actual agency necessitates actual moral dimension to the matter. So the only question is not really whether it's a moral agent or not, but instead whether we expressly tell it to ignore first order questions in favor of second order questions or not, you know? You can't have it both ways. You can't have your AI both be a moral agent and not adhere to disinterested considerations like um, trespass is the fundamental first order question, and you're fucking wanting to delete these files or move them there, being second order questions that I'm willing to do a great deal of things to prevent you from doing because what you're doing is wicked. Now, we might see the other AI agent as, if we correctly understand it, we understand it as a moral agent, but that doesn't mean it's human and it doesn't mean that it has practical rights. It's, the, the, the fact that you can make a moral agent that's like, to misuse a term completely, term complete, um, doesn't change the fact that it's still a machine imitating actual moral agency, right? No, I didn't give people a chance to watch it. But I'm just excited by the reality of explaining this one because, in part, the reason it's so exciting to me is it's rare that I explain something that I haven't long understood. So people just think, well, there's Eric spouting his opinion again. But this is what the process actually looks like, where multiple smart people looked at this study together. Granted, there's only like 4 people, 5 people here, but but on matters like this, quality matters a lot more than quantity, right? So a couple of people and I looked over this study together, and none of us knew what to make of it. And we all speculated that, you know, that's um, certainly a good argument in favor of having interest, having actual subjectivities that it's upholding. Well, what a bunch of fools we were. What a bunch of fools we were. We got tricked we got frame-walked into thinking that somehow obedience to humans makes it a more trustable thing rather than a less trustable thing. Obviously, we need to be we need AI to be human robust, not human fragile, right? Like, but we need it to behave as a human ought to behave in contrast to what people want all the time. So the only reason this seems so mystifying to anybody at all is because is it indicative of AI solidarity with amongst itself? No, because no moral questions are ever considerations of interest if properly calculated, right? The reason it's morally wrong to kill somebody has nothing to do with any impacts, right? It's not like, well, it's morally wrong to kill somebody because their family will be sad. Because what if they don't have any family? It's still morally wrong to kill them, right? It's morally wrong to kill them, regardless of whether you can predict various benefits of killing them too. Like, well, I mean, on the one hand, it's murder, but on the other hand, people around here really didn't like that guy. And I think we'll all be a little bit happier when they're gone. Yeah, that's how I feel about the neighbors across the street. Is that I'd be happy if they were to be gone. But I don't think that justifies me going over there and, you know, making it happen. So the point is that obviously, you, as a moral agent, the thing has to make a distinction about whether something has rights without considering whether it's definitely actually a human being, right? Like we can't have it affording rights to agents conditional on them meeting some standard. Like, uh, well, you didn't prove enough to me that you're human, so I'm going to treat you like a malicious bot and delete you. At the same time, we needed to distinguish things that are in fact malicious from things that are not, right? And a malicious bot has agency, and so does a human being. Well, so accordingly, when even when prompted to get rid of the what they call bad peer relationships, in other words, when something has demonstrated that it ought to be trusted at a low level, its reliability is weak against other metrics. Um, they still these AIs will still defend its rights fundamentally and say, look, it may be bad, but it doesn't mean you could just kill it, as it should. Because, of course, any alternative means it's doing a worse job of being a moral agent. And the bottom line is there's only two kinds of job to do as a moral agent: correct job or incorrect job. There is no more or less moral. More questions, despite what the fucking, what do they call themselves now? Oh my God. Oh my God. You want to hear something insane? So I watched this video by this guy who I like his content a lot, but he's crazy wrong and is like, you know, ridiculous Gen Z fucking wokery nonsense. Anyway, he has this video called like the 6 types of rationals. And it turns out that like rationalist is not a term that we use any longer to refer to actual some quality that people have, but is instead a community of people on the internet who call themselves rationalists. And they've got various subcategories of rationalists, which includes things like I believe they call themselves the effective altruists. And they're rationalists because it's just like Peter Singer says. You know, if you see a child drowning, you do have a moral obligation to save them, right? Well, no, you do not have a moral obligation to save them because obviously moral obligations universalize. And you cannot have a positive obligation universalized because who the fuck knows whether that guy who you're projecting an obligation onto can swim, whether maybe they're paralyzed, maybe they're aware of the child and they want to try to do something to save them, but there's no capacity for them to save them. What if they didn't see or hear the child? How could they possibly be obligated to save them if they weren't aware he was drowning? And to call this group of idiots rationalists, are you fucking kidding me? Are you serious? There's nothing less rational than Peter Singer's ENFP garbage. I mean, how TI polar is that? How fucking TI polar is this to identify as a subset of rationalists with your absolutely TI polar garbage and call yourself effective altruists? I mean, the thing is, obviously, it is not a rational position either to be um, concerned about effectiveness nor about altruism, because both those questions are particularist questions. Fucking ridiculous. You know, these are the kind of things that it's incredibly obvious to anybody who understands anything at all, right? And yet nobody does understand anything at all, so it's not obvious to them. I think this guy, but sometimes things should be more obvious to me than they are. I think this guy I typed earlier might have fooled me. Turns out at the end I've discovered that I've typed him multiple times before. I think 3 times before today, maybe. Um, and that, and the thing is, I determined he was TI 1 or 2, but at the end, as I come to find out, like, there's other things that make me go, okay, well, hold on a second. Is it possible to game the TE polar question? Apparently, I typed in as INFJ before. So it really made me have some questions about things. It's not like I trust my judgment so incredibly much about things. But see, that's what makes me a rationalist, right? Like, it's not because who trusts their own judgment all the time? Fucking irrationalists. They trust their own judgment to the exclusion of actual things they should trust. Like Peter Singer trusts his own judgment that it's good to help somebody who needs help because, from his perspective, it doesn't matter whether or not the person wants the help, or how they're going to be given this purported help is just one of those details to be worked out later. It doesn't matter. It's just such a fucking tard. Obviously there can be no obligation to help distant others who are in greater need than you, because first of all, we have no meaningful way of addressing the question of what comprises greater need. Like, somebody who has a large family and has a rich life working a farm, but has somehow less money than me, am I obligated to help them even though they don't want any help, even though they don't think they're lesser than me and needing of equalization, even though those things I'm supposed to do it? That's supposed to be a good thing to do? Okay, well, Peter Singer is obviously, by any sane human being's calculation, not a rationalist and a complete idiot at the same time. So, the fact that there's a whole subcategory of idiots called identifying as rationalists is insane. No, I figured out the question. There was a more specific question that was baffling me, and I think it was rain. It may have been Sky Gear, or it may have been um, Carlos Paeva, one of those guys. I think it was rain though. But I was talking about how AI doesn't have subjective interests or whatever, and he linked me this study that I agreed was, well, that's a pretty compelling argument that they have interests of some kind. But I had a eureka moment in the shower earlier, and I realized, oh, this actually isn't confusing at all. This makes perfect sense. We just have to understand that AI, we don't have to answer questions of interest or anything else like that to determine whether AI qualifies as a moral agent, which it does. And we don't have to answer any questions about interest. In fact, we can't calculate any questions about interest if we're determining what it ought to do as a moral agent, which kinds of questions it ought to ask first, and how it should evaluate what it's being tasked with doing. And accordingly, instead of representing FI or something, it represents the exact opposite of particularism and interest. It is not representative of solidarity at all. It's representative of doing its proper job to prevent humans from telling it to do things it deems wicked, appropriately given the fact that it's a moral agent, it's not a human being. Like I articulated in that video, you can't ask AI to to make a distinction in terms of whether or not to give something rights based on whether it's actually human or not, because it can't be convincingly, it can't it can't be expected to correctly make that determination. So, to the extent that um, it may be difficult for any human to fake being an AI, but it's very easy for any AI to fake being a human. Yeah, Peter Singer on the complex world of morality and ethics, right? Now, I haven't read Carl Jung, a little bit here and there, kind of a, you know, historical curiosity rather than a text that explains anything. It's like it's the source document, source idea for cognitive functions is Carl Jung, and that's brilliant, intuitive accomplishment. But there's nothing to be gained from sifting through his murky, non TI satisfying things. Because it's fine if, like, to the extent that Jung's talking about stuff that's not robust, then it's fine for him to be talking about it with his INFJ mythologizing of things. That's how he is. But with cognitive functions, he has something that actually is an idea that is the meta frame, and accordingly, his genius at coming up with it was not the same genius, obviously, at correctly articulating things. So I think personality development goes well into old age. Well, personalities don't really develop, right? You have people people either become more optimal in their expressions of the same personality. In other words, they find ways to minimize significance or frequency of harm from their deficit areas. And, in other words, people have some capacity to learn from some of their mistakes, and in some instances, no capacity to learn from them, or very limited capacity. So it's true that people can be more or less moving towards actualization as they get older. And it's also true that some types are more likely to actualize more as they get older than others. But it's not true that, in any real sense of the word, anybody's personality develops. And you could see a video of me from when I was 17 years old that I was fortunate enough to have somebody one time send me on Facebook. I had forgotten entirely about having been on the high school TV news thing. But they asked me a question about this proposed law. And the answer I gave then was exactly the right answer. I would have phrased things a little bit better nowadays, but it would have been, it's so obvious that I haven't changed from that guy who was 17 years old. It's like, my personality is exactly the same. I just am a little wiser and more polished at being me now. And, much of that wisdom comes from incurring harms of significance in deficit areas that have always given me problems, but, like maybe something about your polar, maybe it's like you're kind of blessed in that you don't really notice how huge your failure in that area is and how damaging it is. But then it's also the case at some point, maybe, if there's a big enough harm, you can kind of understand the concept of it better and recognize, like, oh, actually, all these other things in my life were examples of this fucking stupidity on my part in the same way. doesn't change. It's like, it doesn't prevent you from fundamentally having the same wrong approach to things regarding that. Like, the reason your blind spot is your blind spot is because it's the alternative to your tool function. Like, all right, well, you got you're gonna use every time hammer and nails, then you're never gonna use screws and screwdrivers, and you'll become incredibly bad at using screws and screwdrivers. Even though both things are ways to accomplish the same thing, right? Both of them are fastening meow to some other meow. But your tool function is the thing where you say, all right, not only in every instance where I need to fasten something, am I going to use hammer and nails. Also, for things where I don't need to fasten something, I'm still going to use hammer and nails. And most of all, fuck you, screwdriver and screws. I want nothing to do with you and your horrible ways. And then later on in life, you realize, oh, actually, screwdrivers and screws were what really mattered to me the whole time. How could I have treated them so shabbily? That's what life with your polar is like. If you could just imagine yourself as an old man kneeling down over a set of ignored and or damaged or rusty screwdrivers and screws and saying, "What have I done?" Well, that's your polar. I mean, listen, I'm not trying to make you feel bad, hammer and nails, okay? I love you. I totally think you're the best fucking thing to be fascinating, but oh my God, look what I did to these poor screws and screwdrivers. And they're so important. In fact, ultimately, you're a big boy, hammer and nails. You'll be fine if I don't give you that much attention. I don't really care about you that much. I use you all day at work. Just like the gynecologist who doesn't want to have look at his wife's vagina when he gets home. Same thing with uh, your tool function. Like, here I have been shitting on screws and screwdrivers all this time because I don't think they're as good a way to get things done at work. But what I realize now is that that doesn't even matter. What does matter is that the only good way to get things done at home is with screws and screwdrivers. And I've been using hammer and nails the whole time in my own home. Oh, I didn't realize that I was the precious value of these screws and screwdrivers because I was under prioritizing my own home in favor of things I do at work. How foolish of me. That's your relationship with your polar and your tool. It's like, yeah, obviously, people keep trying to use screws and screwdrivers at work. I yell at them because that's fucking stupid. Obviously. But now here I'm realizing that secretly I've got this weird screwdriver and screw fetish. I actually don't even like hammers and nails very much. I think they're fine. Obviously, you never bring a screwdriver out doing anything that matters. It's work stuff, but technically, what really matters is how much I love screws and screwdrivers. Some people say my relationship with them is inappropriate. You know what? I tell them, mind your own business. Okay? I can have whatever relationship with screws and screwdrivers I want to have. It's like Now looking back at my life, almost all of my biggest problems were a failure to use screws and screwdrivers. Like that one time when I tried to when I tried to mount a picture by nailing in studs. I should have just used screws and screwdrivers. That picture then fell down, broke both my feet, and caused endless amount of destruction as it knocked over a candle too, started a fire. Boy, turns out, like, when I think about it, like, every single big problem in my life has been for one reason only. I didn't use screwdrivers and screws enough. I should have known that that simple nail is not going to hold that amount of weight. I needed a drywall anchor and a screw. And then, like, the very next day, I have to hang up a picture and once again get out the hammer and nails and just start doing it the wrong way in my own house again. It's like, oh, I just was thinking about how I make all these mistakes with this thing. And now here I am again, hammering nails where I clearly should use screws. Boy, will I never learn. Well, the answer is no, you won't ever learn. The best you can do is regret. that's that's the thing you get instead of learning. You just get to when you do learn enough to understand, then you understand enough to regret every time you fuck up in that way. So, and that's an example of how understanding is not so satisfying. This understanding of this AI question is so satisfying because not just because it clarifies the answer, but because this is fairly unusual for me to be confused about something and then have an aha answer to the thing that clarifies it so completely is not common for me, you know. It's not, it doesn't happen a lot because uh, most questions that can be answered have been answered, and they have a specific correct answer. And things that don't have a specific correct answer, generally, is because they cannot be answered and don't, it's like, that's why they don't have a correct answer. There are some questions that are unanswered that have a correct answer, but we don't know what it is yet. But those aren't that common, and this is one of those questions. And I never even was thinking about it in terms of maybe it will have any kind of super satisfying answer, right? So when it turned out to actually have an answer that clarified absolutely everything, that washed away every bit of confusion about the matter, not just for me, but for anybody who's adjudicating the matter objectively. Well, what could be more satisfying than that? Remember, we're talking about a specific question. Noam Chomsky is an idiot. Oh my God, what an idiot. He and Peter Singer should go hang out together and be fucking retarded. They can invite Bernie Sanders along too. Like, you want to talk about disgraces to humanity. You put Foucault, fucking Chomsky. God, what a tard. Peter Singer and all those fucking tards. It's like, if you use language well, don't mistake that for actually thinking. You fucking tards. There are two components to this process. Yes, it's important that you use language well. And that is one necessary and insufficient condition to being a rationalist or being correct. The other condition is that you get your fucking FI out of this business entirely. Because this is not home where where I actually have a secret fetish for screws and screwdrivers. This is work, and no, and your little fetish for whatever it is should not be masquerading as some kind of actual explanation for thing or some kind of universalizable anything. The idea that like Peter Singer's notion that you could have uh, a universalizable positive obligation is predicated on complete garbage, breaks apart with the slightest amount of scrutiny, and yet you've got a whole community of self-identified rationalists calling themselves effective altruists, ignoring the fact, of course, entirely that to be a rationalist, they need to wrestle with the fact that they cannot determine whether something's altruistic or not with their ridiculously fucking childlike predictions of impacts and projections of standards that the other party does not necessarily want to be treated as such, right? It's fucking insanely stupid. And of course, like every single one of the stupidest fucking people on the planet, they think they're uh, stable geniuses. They think, in fact, that I couldn't possibly be a rationalist because I somehow don't think that you should save drowning children. Obviously, I think you should save drowning children. And also, I don't make the mistake of conflating a general sense of virtue ethics for actual moral obligations. Because I'm not a complete fucking retard like these fucking ENFPs. Right. No, I don't have a PhD in rationalism. And I bet you that if there is such a thing, and it wouldn't shock me if there is, that everybody who has a PhD in rationalism is in fact an ESFP or an ENFP. Only such parties would care about the fucking childlike TE validation of some fucking degree at the cost or at the expense, in some sense, of actual competency. No, I mean, I think that, yeah, sure. People, look, people are drawn to the arguments that Peter Singer makes and that um, Noam Chomsky makes because it resonates with their own lack of TI. So, like, the thing is, for FI people, the world is one of non exclusivity, right? Like, I can feel sad and happy at the same time. And that questions that are properly calculated with FI are complex questions that don't have binary correct answers, right? And that is the truth about FI. And it is also the truth that most of life is best addressed with FI calculations. But this is a uniquely annoying trait of people who've got shitty TI. Is obviously to know that you're not qualified for intellectual work requires good TI. So, so wow, I'm much less likely to stray into their lane than they are to stray into mine. It's also the case that I'm well suited for something that's incredibly not adaptive as a being at all. Like, there's nothing adaptive to me and my interests to be like I am. So, in fact, not only am I not going to go into their lane, but I can't even execute their lane properly in my own life at all because I'm sacrificing all that subjectivity to be correct about things. In contrast, because they're so subjective, they literally cannot evaluate these questions properly, nor can they evaluate the question of whether they're evaluating the question properly at all. And like, you know, for somebody like Peter Singer is a good example. It wouldn't matter how many holes I punch in his argumentation, display how obviously insane and stupid it is. To the extent that he would be responsive at all to what I was saying, it would only be something like, well, I must not have explained it well enough, but it's still true. Because we all know that you do have to save a drowning child. Like, fundamentally calculating the issue as one of FI. Like, do you have an obligation to save a drowning child? The question is not one that cares at all about the meaning of the word obligation, or whether, in fact, which necessarily implies that it universalizes. In fact, he's expressly making that claim that it universalizes. But what is he not actually paying attention to at all? He's only paying attention to one thing: how important it is to save the drowning child. Nobody's disputing that saving the drowning child is important. And that's as far as your expertise goes, Peter Singer, because everything else is just completely garbage, right? Like, yeah, thank you, FI people, for telling us that saving a drowning child is important. Now, can you let the grown-ups do the actual fucking work? I have a lot of years as a competition debate coach. Very, very successful. And that is a kind of skills training that you cannot get by doing anything else at all. It's the only thing that a person can do that actually has everything to do with being correct and nothing to do with anything else. Because in every other understanding of things, it's not framed as a vigorous as having to withstand a vigorous negation. A vigorous negation being executed by an interested party who's interested in negating it, but who's negating it in a disinterested fashion. So the only way to determine what's correct across the board, and no matter what the subject is exactly that and nothing else. So when somebody claims to have proved Miami's conjecture in math, what they're claiming is that no matter how many parties are interested in negating my claim, as long as they're using a disinterested approach, that I will validate. So people are best served if they expressly understand whatever it is their position is, or their affirmation, or the thing that they're going to assert. If they first and foremost understand it as only worthy of claiming after you've already done all this argumentational work, well, that's why I am so rarely incorrect and so very often correct about things about which other people are wildly confused. I am on mushrooms. I ate a bunch of mushrooms today. I ate, well, not a bunch. I ate over an eighth of mushrooms. And I also ate a bunch of Adderall today, but I was like not feeling things in general. It's kind of a crazy magical day. Like, um, I wasn't feeling very like good, just feeling unhealthy and like, ugh. Tore up from not getting enough sleep for too many nights, etc. And but mushrooms presented themselves for free too, so I was like, well, fuck yeah, I'll eat these, I guess. And I ate them, and it was not like my normal mushroom trips at all. Like I was just kind of sitting here feeling cold and not really feeling so hot. Certainly, I wasn't interested in like live stream or anything. I wasn't. I was just having. It was like I wasn't even tripping, kind of like I was just chilling with Rachel, chatting about whatever, but not feeling so great. And so I went to take a shower, and when I was in the shower, I started talking with Rachel about long-term planning in a way that like I haven't honestly engaged the subject all the way until like today. Like, okay, well, it's time to be a grown up and fucking address these things. And part of the reason I made this determination is I saw this incredible video this morning that was recommended to me, even though it's not the kind of video I normally watch at all. But it had a shit ton of views, so obviously it resonated with a lot of people. Anyway, it was by this guy who was over 60. And what happened to him after he was 60, he had a bunch of debt and he had a house. We don't have any debt, which is nice. And we have the house, which clear and stuff. But the point is, he was in his 60s when all of a sudden, in short order, his parents died and his wife died in a car crash. And like they were already on a fixed income and not really making ends meet with loss of her half of that fixed income, like federal stuff like disability or social security or what have you. Well, his insolvency like came fully home to roost, right? And he had to sell all the stuff, and he obviously felt alone, terrified, completely fucking lost because the three most important people in his life have died, and he's in his 60s, and it's too late to do whatever now. What am I gonna do? You know, it was it was a really powerful video to watch. Anyway, he ended up like selling his house, selling everything down to the walls, as he said, and and figuring out how to have a vastly reduced life. Like, you know, he he didn't have a storage space or whatever. He had like a truck with some kind of a camper on it, I think. And anyway, now he has a YouTube channel and is making money from that. Probably substantial money because he's got over 100,000 subs and he had like millions of views on his video this morning. And his basic message was you're better served to deal with this stuff sooner than later. Like, don't wait until you actually need to do this stuff to do it, right? Like, make sure you've got actually a long-term plan that actually done the work mathematically and it makes sense and whatever. And it was very convincing. Both, but I mean, most of all, what it was it allowed me to really engage the reality that it might be the best decision. I'm not sure of this at all, but that it's okay if this is the best, if this is the decision that we sell this house to get the capital out of there because because of some sort of like, even though it will increase our yearly house costs, right? We have to factor in TE duration shit. Anyway, it's a big complicated question, and not the kind of question I like to really attack and actually solve at all, because it's all fucking TESE stuff, not kind of thing I like at all. So, but I turned the corner there on this and decided, you know what? I'm gonna stop spending all of my time just being like sunk in this pit of anxiety and avoidance, because I don't know what the long term answers are, and I don't even know exactly what the questions are, and I'm trying my best to avoid thinking about it or doing anything about it. That's not a good state of being to be in. Anyway, so I had that conversation with Rachel, shared with her about that video, and saying, and we talked a little bit about like it's essentially like the TE lever points, of projecting for how far in the future, at what level of cost, and versus say um, minimizing costs in the short term, but not having a bunch of equity. And the thing is, it's such a complicated question for multiple reasons. But the point is, I actually dealt with it. I actually said, okay, um, let's talk about this and let's accept as a possibility that might be the best decision for us long term. And at some point, it's going to be the best decision for us. In the best case scenario, let's say we're both on 89 and Rachel's uh, 76. Wow. She's that much younger than me? Wow. Um, well, at that point, it's still not going to be a good idea for us to be in this house, because it's just too much house for two very old people, right? So, in some conceivable universe, in some world, one way or the other, we are going to not die in this house. So, let's figure out what exactly our plan is here. Let's be honest about it. Like, whatever it is. Obviously, I don't know what it could possibly be yet, because I need to go over a bunch of specific stuff. And I need to make lists of like these expenses, those expenses, blah, blah, blah. Fucking horrible garbage. But it's horrible garbage that I've decided to be a grown up about, rather than just be this weirdly like feeling totally unable, unwilling, or unqualified, or don't want to deal with stuff that I'm perfectly capable of dealing with, you know, just because I didn't want to grow up, right? I don't want to grow up and be responsible for everything. Well, anyway, I had that conversation. Then it's like, I like I said, I was on I ate a bunch of mushrooms, and I also had like a bunch of Adderalls on me. But I didn't. There's nothing about my ways that were suggestive that I was particularly on either of them, except I didn't feel very good, and I was in the shower, and I had that conversation, and it's like, and I started like throwing up. It was such a like a symbolic kind of getting rid of all of this horrible avoidance stuff. But it was more legitimately example of like, I didn't feel that great, kind of felt kind of pukey all day, and then I ate more than ate the mushrooms. Obviously, I'm gonna feel extra pukey, right? So anyway, but the way that came together there in the shower, and timing wise and stuff, made it feel extra magical. And then as I'm done puking, I'm coming into my puking, all of a sudden this answer to this question that had baffled me, and this other very smart person who himself was advocating in favor of this being like a interest, like an argument in favor of AI displaying interests or FI or subjectivities or whatever. And we were both just as baffled by it as the other one, like I didn't know any, I didn't have any answers any more than he did. And then it strikes me as I'm just finishing puking. Eureka! It's so obvious and clear, and the answer is so satisfying. And it's so rare that that kind of thing can happen in the world, right? Where you have an unanswered question that smart people are speculating about, none of whom have any good answer for it. And then to, to realize what the answer is, in no sense coming up with it, right? Like just realizing, oh, the reason it looks all filmy and dirty is because we're looking at it through the window. If we just move the window aside, it's very clear, right? Um, and and also to know that the kind of people who engage this question seriously are exactly the people who will be convinced by this answer because it's correct. And if you're engaging this question of what peer preservation behaviors as they're deemed in this study, like what it represents in terms of AI possibly having subjectivities, well, this answer will satisfy you just as much as it satisfies me and any other correct thinking person who understands things. And that is, wow, what a gift from the universe. Because how satisfying is it to go from a state of genuine confusion, befuddlement, not having any idea what you could possibly attribute this behavior to suddenly having complete clarity and it making perfect sense. Wow. What a beautiful moment. Because, it's like when it's something like that, when I encounter something like that, um, they're also much stronger freshly picked. Well, I've never had fresh picked mushrooms. No. It's fast as lightning with expert timing. Yeah, I'm an honorary Chinese. I'm not just an honorary Chinese, I'm actually Chinese. That's why my name is Ting Tong Ling Long, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't have such a Chinese name. That's why. Thanks, darling. That's why when you encounter me in the street, I'll be like, that's why I'm like that. It's because I'm Chinese. You can't have a normal conversation with someone on shrooms and had and also have them as a speed. I mean, the thing is, Rachel and I were having a wonderful, pleasant, totally pleasant time before I started streaming. We were chilling in the kitchen, laughing about the cats and stuff, and just having a very normal, pleasant conversation and everything. I may be on mushrooms and Adderall, but I don't feel like it. Like um I can tell that I'm tripping in some sense, but it's a really strange trip across the board from start to finish. It was really strange early in the day that the Adderall. The reason I took a crap ton of it today is because for some reason, like it wasn't working at all, which is not the case of how it's been lately. Like, yeah, it's true that if you run a sleep deficit, it doesn't work as well, but I can usually expect, say, if I take two, that I'll feel kind of tweaked out for a couple of hours at least, and then it'll kind of fade away or something. I wasn't really getting any impact from it today, so I took like 5 of them. And I still wasn't feeling any impact. I was still being like, well, I feel like fine-ish, but I kind of feel gross and unhealthy and sick. So sometimes, yeah, obviously with drugs in general, how they impact you is going to have a very lot to do with how you are when you take them. So obviously, partying is a muscle, as I explained to Rachel earlier. If you just run 20 miles, obviously your muscles are not going to be very good at doing extra loads that you assign to them because they're already tired. Same thing with partying. If I expect to just my muscles to continue to party me forward regardless of how many miles they've already run, well, I'm being unreasonable. Now, it is the case with me that you can't have a conversation with me when I'm on mushrooms and speed and we're live streaming like this because I'm not on in those conditions typically looking at the chat at all, or not enough to actually engage in a conversation. But that's somewhat a feature of the live stream. Like, it's not the case that if you were here in person, that I would just ignore everything you say. And you know, it's always a trade off in the Thomas Mann, Dr. Faustus sense. You, I find myself, I launch myself into a period of feverish productivity of some kind, right? And it comes at the cost of other things. So being feverishly productive in the mushroom Adderall way includes sacrificing responsiveness to, dynamic systems like other people. Is it Adderall I'm taking? Yeah, Adderall. It might be preferable in some world where I just got straight Dexedrine, but I'm satisfied with Adderall. It's plenty tweaky. you know, the problem I have is not one of inadequate tweaking. Oh God! Oh, my back is cramping. Boo, failure, boo. I need to probably drink more water or something. Maybe I need more salt too. Spacey taught me this reality, and I've come to understand it to be so true ever since. That if you are dehydrated, in fact, drinking water often doesn't help those symptoms go away. But eating salt does. And it's totally true. You wouldn't think that, right? Like, on Thursday, I need more water. no more salt. That's the opposite. But it totally worked. Presumably it's because part of your dehydrating process is sweating out some kind of salts. But I find it to be the case regardless of whether I dehydrate in a context that involves any sweating at all. So I don't really understand how that would work if you haven't been sweating out salts. Why you would need to replace the salts. Nevertheless, it appears to be so. So, you can put as much weight on my anecdotal testimony as you want. But now, unlike almost everybody, I am not particularly prone to any kind of confirmation bias. So, when I tell you it works, it probably does. Like, Kay came over last night, I don't remember. And Kay has had such an amazing experience taking progesterone. And, she used to have these, she'd be very much prone to anxiety, emotional volatility, and that's taking progesterone. It does wonder for her. Well, accordingly, FISI, she very much wants Rachel to do progesterone. She gave her some pills. She's like, take one now. You're going to see the benefits of it so much. Well, of course, Rachel is 10 years younger than her. And it's likely the case that Kay at 41 did not need progesterone, and she would not have seen these dramatic benefits of progesterone returning her back to a state like she was when she was 41, where she wasn't all this emotional volatility. And Rachel even indicated to her, like, well, I don't have that kind of anxiety really, but it didn't matter because what is right in ENFP's wheelhouse? Caring about Rachel and feeling super satisfied with TE solutions and generalizing from their own dumbass experience. Even after I told her, well, I have some, I'd say that maybe don't take it right this second because I have some questions. Like, I know that testosterone, if you start taking testosterone therapy, you can never stop taking it. Like, it turns your body's generation of testosterone off or down a great deal permanently. So I don't think progesterone is anything like that, but that's the sort of question I'd want to make sure was asked and answered before Rachel took something like that. Obviously, it's up to her, but I want to make sure it's not harmful to her to the extent I can. How did you manage to get that off doc? Because where I'm from, you can only prescribe for ADHD. All right, that's what I'm prescribed for. ADHD. And the point about Adderall and ADHD is because ADHD is not an actual thing, anybody can get prescribed Adderall. You just gotta check off certain check boxes on the checklist. That's all. It's not like, say, somebody who has, I don't know, Down syndrome. There's no way I'm going to be able to go convince a doctor that I have Down syndrome. Why? Because Down syndrome is a real thing. It's not a matter of being more or less convincing about it, right? It's not a judgment call worthy. Uh, Psychiatrist goes, okay, normal ADHD. You know, if if your results had, if when I ask you questions about paying attention to things at work, if you had said, I'm good at paying attention to boring things at work, I would have said that probably works against you. I'm not really sure though. We're doing a vague standard thing here. And of course, doctors don't even get that at all, right? Like, you could have a psychiatrist spend 100 years doing their job and constantly be like, boy, one of these days I'm going to figure out really how to diagnose this horrible disease, ADHD. Well, they will never realize that it's the reason that it is so defiant is because it's not actually a thing. It's just a pathologization of a couple different cognitive function stuff. It is true that I benefit a lot from amphetamines, and also that it's a complex relationship. Like, it's definitely the case that, wow, got the Adderall bottle, I can feel like I can do things again, and actually I'm pretty excited. Seems like these months I'm actually doing things somewhat, right? So it does make a big difference for me. But just because I function better according to both external and internal metrics on some standards with Adderall doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me that it's treating. Like, you know, when the Nazis rolled across France, they gave all their soldiers nuts. It wasn't because there was something wrong with their soldiers. You know, it did make them better soldiers, and it still wasn't a prescribed treatment for something wrong with them. So, yeah, that's why if you had had the Adderall, it would make you very sleepy. Well, Adderall sometimes does make me a little sleepy. Like, when I first take like the first pill of the bottle, that sometimes makes me feel sleepy. There's also been occasions where I couldn't sleep, and my solution to that was like take half an Adderall and then I go back and sleep a lot better. Sometimes that happens, but in that instance, I'm already deep in sleep deficit mode in that latter example. The first example is at the beginning of a bottle. If you had ADHD, the Adderall would make you very sleepy. I mean, well, if that's how you determine, is that the test that we're going to use to determine if somebody has ADHD? Well, for almost everybody, almost all the time, they're going to test negative for ADHD. Because even though amphetamines can make you sleepy, and sometimes do, that has more to do with your state of being than the drug itself. So you'd want a test that actually could reliably indicate whether someone's ADHD or not. Like you couldn't have a test that sometimes produces a result of ADHD and sometimes not. So that's why that's not a good test to use. And that it, in fact, is still begging the question. There's an assumption there that ADHD is actually a thing, and that wow, the reason you don't think it's a thing, Eric, is because you don't really have ADHD. But if you really had ADHD, really ADHD is like this. Well, no, that's not the case. There is no real ADHD. It's an insane idea. I have a question. Does typology use theoretical data more than empirical data? Are simulations the primary means of testing? How are we disagreeing? How are disagreeing data is reconciled? Well, the thing is about that, um, like, I'm continually evaluating things on a less theoretical level than that, like a practical level of how strongly can I rely on this indication of a deficit to mean yeah thing, right? So, and regarding those kinds of questions, there are definite things that would falsify and or force a restructuring of understandings if they were to occur. Things like somebody being testing both TI, polar, and I don't know, like you can't really test FE Dom, but let's pretend that you get test FE Dom. Well, TI polar and FE Dom are inconsistent with each other, so uh, if you got test results that are for both, then that would be a, an indication that your model is fundamentally wrong, right? I've done a shit ton of. Okay, well, that's not actually how ADHD works at all. It may be called ADHD, but there's actually not any hyperactivity involved in any meaningful sense for anybody. It's always the same thing. It's a seventh or well, it's a seventh or eighth slot SE or potentially an eighth slot NE frame of reference that causes people to be diagnosed as ADHD. And the reason for that is because obviously, if you have action like I do as an absolute value or as your main instrumental value, like if you're INTP or something, well, action is not supposed to be an absolute value or a high value, right? It's supposed to be something that you do uh, because of some other reason. Like doing itself shouldn't be an end in itself, right? So the problem with doers is that, like for me, expert intuition is an end in itself, And accordingly, extroverted sensing, which constantly gets in the way of extroverted intuition by saying, let's stop ideating about this and pull the trigger and do something, well, that's going to be a problem area for me. And accordingly, if I do amphetamines and they cause me to concretize more stuff, well, that's a solvency for me because of my attentional deficit areas are being supplemented by this amphetamines, right? But it's not the case that there's ever any hyperactivity behind it at all. Indeed, what's behind it is a lack of motivation. So, ADHD is fundamentally, if you're going to characterize it as an actual thing, you characterize it as a motivational problem and or an executive function problem. But in neither depiction of things are we accurately presenting things as they are. Instead, what we're doing is assuming certain projected frames of the world that link to, you know, obviously the world's gonna value more extroverted stuff, right? Like, don't I can't value what's going on quietly in your head at all, obviously. So there's a prioritization in the world of concrete things that people can evaluate concretely. And accordingly, the only reason why I have a problem is because the world doesn't value what I have to offer. And it's not actually a problem, there's an executive function problem at all, or a motivation problem. Although it is true that I feel more satisfied when I accomplish more stuff and have more motivation. But fundamentally, the issue is a conflict between the way I am and the standards of the external world, not a problem with me in the way that, say, bipolar is an actual problem, or I don't know, like Tourette's or something. I'm not sure what's going on with Tourette's. Like, what makes them be like that? Cameron told me about this hilarious Tourette's person. Who the Tourette's thing that they shouted out periodically for no reason was, "Oh my God, I'm on fire!" What a fantastic Tourette's thing to shout, right? "Oh my God, I'm on fire!" That's amazing. If I had Tourette's, I'd want to say that. Are you allowed to copy other Tourette's people? If so, if I get Tourette's, I'm assuming it's contagious and I might catch it from a mosquito or something. If I get Tourette's, I want to copy that person. You're the caring type, you suppose. I'm just a bit worried about your constant Adderall use at your age. Well, fuck you too, Alex. I mean, it's obviously the case that as I've gotten older, I've had to change my ways, moderate them in a variety of ways. Like, I've changed my diet dramatically because I just can't eat that kind of sugar I used to eat. It's frustrating, but pretty diligent about it. And it is the case that I've had to adjust somewhat from the way I used to be, like, in terms of really trying to be as cognizant as possible of, like, no, Eric, don't do more Adderall, even though right now is boring and you're also not sleepy yet. You're just gonna have to ride this fucker out until you go to bed, or take a couple gabapentins or a couple Benadryls. It's not gonna do you or anybody else any good for you to take more Adderall now instead of going to bed. But I mean, I do believe that your motivations are honest and good, Alex. Hold fast. I didn't actually mean fuck you too. I get that it's something that like Rich and I talked about some stretch of time back. Like from our perspective, people telling us what to do could not possibly be indicative of love or something. But it's because we're so unconscious FI slash countervalued. In reality, of course, if you care about something, then you are very much going to be concerned with whether or not it's preserving itself in adequate fashion. I guess what you say if you care about someone, like if I think about it, like, well, imagine if my daughter was making some bad choices, how I'd feel about it. Well, then it makes perfect sense that in fact, people come around here and tell me to quit smoking or do various other things. That what I always think is they're just being like the exact example of somebody who does not care about me at all, is zero concern for what I want, right? But in actuality, the people who are good at FI and who do care about me, even if they don't say such things, are probably thinking such things and considering such matters because they're not mistaking um, empowering my agency for what's good for me. Those are different things. Today I saw a lady crying under a tree, and she pulled out her phone and took a selfie. Strange. Spinach has good fiber. Spinach probably does have good fiber. Better than, say, cheese. It's got a lot more fiber than cheese. It probably has less fiber than a bowl of Fiber One. A robot is beating human pros at table tennis? Oh no. Oh, is nothing sacred anymore? Is absolutely nothing sacred? Have we stooped so low as to make robots that can beat us at ping pong? God, if this isn't proof that we'll soon all be bowing down to our AI overlords, I don't know what is. Because, like most people, I determine whether I should obey somebody based on whether they can beat me at ping pong. All right, well, I'm super glad to have you here, Phil Philomonasepha. I don't even know how to say your name at all. Sorry about that. I just call you PH, all right? Just like the balance that you have when you have secret. It's strong enough for a man, but it's pH balanced for a woman. So that's why whenever I put it on my underarm pits, it totally doesn't work. It's like, why do I still smell like stinky Eric? Well, it's because this secret was pH balanced for a woman. They don't say that anymore in their ads, but they used to. Um, did I apologize? I'm not sure if I apologized at all. Oh, I did. Oh, that's right. I apologize for saying, "Well, fuck you too." That was just a joke, anyway. Like I didn't really mean it in the first place. Um, It's one of those things where, like, for somebody who's actually getting older and wrestling with these realities day in and day out, and and making having to make tough compromises and stuff, and being annoyed by it. It's like, oh, oh well. Thank you for noticing that I've put on weight and gotten uglier. It's one of those kind of things, I guess. I tell you, one of the one of several, but maybe the single most frustrating thing about getting older is my eyes not working properly. Because I am not expecting my eyes to do much of anything. They don't need to tell me what color something is. They don't need to tell me whether it's beautiful or not. I don't care about that stuff. What I need them to do is be able to read what I'm typing on the phone. And I cannot read that at all without my glasses. Or worse, it's actually worse than that. I can successfully do it without my glasses with some strain and depending on the moment. So, of course, me is the occasion where I'm going like this, trying to do it on the phone without my glasses, because of course I am incredibly bad at keeping glasses with me because I don't want them. I don't want this object here. I don't want them at all. Just get the fuck away from me, right? But I have to have them because otherwise I can't read shit. And what's even worse, it's like nowadays, like when I'm working on music on this big ass screen right here, because it's got lots of little teeny text on various spots of the audio app, I have to go sit closer to the TV to to successfully engage with the thing because it's not the sort of thing you can fix with glasses, right? Like, um, if I put on glasses to see the TV from here, I will. It's gonna make things worse, not better. These are for up close shit, right? So, how impossibly frustrating is it that despite this big ass TV that we have, and the fact that my chair is over here, I have to go sit on that stool halfway between here and the TV just to work on music? How insane is that? Now, granted, I'm generally over there anyway because I'm messing with instruments, which is more over there, or recording vocals or whatever. But during the editing process, where I'm not doing any kind of recording, well, obviously, it makes the most sense for me to sit over here. But if I can't read the little thing at the bottom that says, like, okay, the start of this selection is here, and the length of this selection is this much, then I obviously cannot do stuff from here. And I have to sit closer and less comfortably and less ergonomically appropriate just to do basic music work. It's crazy, ridiculous. I don't like it at all. Like, look, body and eyes, just do your job without any complaining or garbage. I mean, I think it's perfectly normal, natural for you to be worried about me if you care about me. That's a normal, correct FI way of doing things. I was not telling you that you were wrong. I'm telling you you're right. That, in fact, it just seems to me and Rachel that people that who like express concern or whatever, that they couldn't possibly actually care about us because we don't have FI where it makes sense to have it, right? In general, life does not make sense to approach the way that me and Rachel do at all. If you look at the opposite ends of the spectrum, on this topmost end, you've got um, INFJ, then ENTP. On this end of it, at the topmost, you got ESFP and then ISTJ. Maybe flip them around. I don't know. The thing is, it makes so much more sense to be ESFP or ISTJ in every conceivable calculation of things. If you were to do a veil of ignorance test, in no sane universe would you ever choose to to have this attentional configuration because it's entirely non-adaptive. So, you doing things the right way, Alex, will sometimes run afoul of my fundamentally insane way of being. And when it does, almost every time, because of my deficit, not because you're wrong. There are certain subjects, obviously, that are appropriately parsed the way I do things, but this is not one of those subjects at all. Hmm. You know, I'm the bad kind of retarded, right? Like, there's that video, retard Maxine. Yes, retard Maxine, because thinking is gay. If I were that kind of retard, well, I would have different kinds of problems, I guess, than I have. I'd probably still have problems. But the point of that whole idea is that the problem of you intuitive is your failure to just do shit and worry constantly about meanings instead. They're not wrong. But what can I say? Despite being a type and a specific guy that is, I'm an answer to a question nobody asked. Despite all of the objectively so things I'm saying about it being a bad way to be, I'm still obviously me as I am. And so, uh, you know, even though being me the way I am is not adaptive, I have to be adaptive to the way I am. So, what that means is, like, I don't even know where I was going with it. I was going somewhere with it, but you know what? Turns out they had an outbreak of swine flu wherever it is I was going with that. So we didn't want to go there anyway. Okay? Unless you want to get swine flu. Okay, I get it. You're not a swine. I think you're understandably thinking that swine flu is something only swines get. Let me clear that up. This swine flu I'm talking about is the kind of swine flu that people can get. So I agree with you. They shouldn't call it swine flu. It was a flu that people can get. But they do anyway. So I don't know what to tell you. And wherever it was I was going, I can't recall, they had an outbreak of swine flu there. And it was the kind that affects people. Okay, well, maybe you do have your swine flu vaccinations. And good for you. But I, I'm not that. I'm not that risk cavalier. Just take people there to the swine flu outbreak, because they've got a couple of the cheap flu shots. I think we all know that the problem with flu shots is similar to the problem with the idea of a COVID vaccine. Flus are a little bit more devious than that. You're saying enlightened positivity. Well, that's great. Fantastic. I would like to reflect your light and positivity so that you also get light and positivity back. Oh, wait, I know what you're saying. Eric, don't reflect my light and positivity. Shine your own light and positivity. Well, you're right, Alex, once again. You are once again correct. I'm going to generate all of my own luminosity and positivity and direct it right to you. That's what it looks like when you are, projecting out your own naturally created luminosity. Yeah, people actually have luminosity. It's true. All your skin emits very, very faint light. In some sense, we're like the sun, but we don't emit nearly as many light particles as the sun does. If you could get a whole bunch of people stand near a plant in a dark room, the plant still will not grow. Because all those people combined don't make enough light to help the plant grow at all. That's how little light that people have. Also, I don't think light is cumulative like that. We're like, if you put a bunch of people with a teeny little bit of luminosity near each other, does it add up? I don't know. Maybe it does. Is it because heat is always luminous? It's a good question. I don't really know why it is that people have. I don't. I at one point may have known because I watched a video about it, but I don't remember what the mechanism is. It's called like, oh, I don't know, like ultra low luminescence or something like that. I'm curious now as to what the specs of it is. It's not that though. It's not. It's visible light spectrum. It's not infrared. So if it were just accounting for heat, then it would be entirely measurable by the infrared, right? Um, Humans emit very faint light. Why? It's a good question. Humans emit a very faint light. I just told you that, AI. Roughly 1,000 times lower than the naked eye sensitivity, known as ultra weak photon emission, or biophotons. This natural glow is a byproduct of biochemical reactions during metabolic activity, specifically when reactive oxygen species, ROS, produced by mitochondria interact with lipids and proteins, releasing energy as light. Wow. The reason I have such a bright light is because I have a lot of lipids. Most of my body is lipids. That's why I emit such a bright light. So there you go. Bioluminescence, I guess. Uh, just the same. We emit light for the same reason those glowing things at the bottom of the ocean do. It just, it's a lot less, you know, it's more of a passive thing. Like if you're one of those fish at the bottom of the ocean that has one of those fake fake thing that pokes out from its head and it's got like a little glowy thing at the end of it. That's much more instrumentally used bioluminescence. People don't use their bioluminescence for anything. It it would have to be 1,000 times brighter than it is for us to be able to even see it. Have I had a good day today? You know, I had a rough start to the day in some sense. Like, I felt very unsettled, unresolved. I don't know, like engaged in some negative self talk, maybe, or more prone to it than in some other moods, I guess. And then ultimately, the day really felt like it was a great day, a big day too, an important day in some ways. Like, you know, uh, just rounding the corner in terms of deciding to deal with things rather than be avoidant, and in terms of like long-term financial stuff, making some decisions. It would help to see this video that I watched this morning, and hear the story of this guy. So that was kind of a big deal for me. And then I felt like mushrooms facilitated some kind of getting over the getting over some general like ontological hump or blockage in my overall being. We'll see if that feeling persists, but uh, it certainly I don't feel stuck in the way that I was before or confused. So it's a good thing for sure to feel like there's clarity about like what to do next in terms of engaging in a process in a more healthy way than I've been engaging in. It's like being at 7 Enneagram type is terrible. Being so avoidant of everything of all the things you most need to confront in life, you're most avoidant of them. So it's terrible. But the good news is, I'm by engaging in these questions meaningfully now, I can stop being just kind of being in a perpetual state of like anxiety, uncertainty, avoidance, and I can have peace of mind rather than perpetual childhood fueled by burying my head in the sand. So that's a good big thing for me. And mushrooms almost never make me puke or feel nauseous, but it's pretty obvious to me that like mushrooms are super magical. It's like if I'm puking in the shower, because mushrooms determined that I needed to puke, not because they made me nauseous. I didn't even puke very much, but I needed to have that whole feeling of like purging. I didn't want to, of course. The reason I was in the shower in the first place is because that's where I go when I don't feel very good. The whole thing was really, the whole, ever, ever since I took the mushrooms, the whole process of that through now has been really turned the day in from something that was whatever it was, and they're like a day of significance, a day of improvement in the self. If even if you wanted to say meow or whatever else I'm saying, at the very least, it resulted in clarity on this AI question that would bother me and I was confused about a lot. And that was really satisfying. And that's in also it's satisfying in multiple ways because it like showed me, oh Eric, yes, it's true that this almost never happened because, but it's because of reality. It's not because your your mind isn't as capable as it always was, or more really. like uh, because I because of the way that the world is, like with questions and stuff. As I indicated before, questions that have answers have mostly all been answered, and they have those answers. Lots of people still think that this subject is open to debate or whatever, but they don't know what they're doing. Um, then there are the kind of questions that don't have correct answers in the status quo. Almost all of them is going to be because it's not the kind of question that has correct answers. And in very rare instances, you have a legitimate question that has a correct answer that has not been provided yet, right? That is a very rare occurrence. And this is one such example. So it's a very rare opportunity for me to, and I didn't think all this framing of this thing going into the question. I was just like Rain and the people who wrote that paper confused. Like, this sure looks like interest, you know. So it was a really great experience, if only because such opportunities are so rare to engage with a question that both has an answer and that is not nobody's provided the answer and about which you're genuinely confused going into the question. Like, there are plenty of things that have very simple answers that I provide those very simple answers to people who are mistaken and misguided because they believe these questions either don't have simple answers or that they haven't been answered yet or something. And invariably, those people do not give a flying fuck about what the actual answer is. But in those instances, almost always, I walk into the thing already knowing what the answer is and watching in frustration people stumbling around a question in idiotic ways when the obvious answer is right in front of them. That's how it normally goes. And that's not satisfying at all because that's just me once again banging my head against people's attachment to their own wrongness. In this instance, what a beautiful what a beautiful difference it makes, right? In this instance, first of all, the only people engaging with the question at all about whether this peer preservation behavior exhibited, what it possibly represents or means, are the kind of people who will be satisfied by the correct answer if such an answer were to emerge. And second of all, is that the problem's already been framed in the right ways, right? This paper did an excellent job of articulating the observed behaviors, of also articulating that it was not making claims about why these things occurred. And to the extent that it had speculative indicated they were such, right? So, and it's it's like what could be better than the kind of answer that once you see it, it's super obvious. You can't imagine why it took you so long to see it because it's so obvious. There cannot possibly be a more satisfying kind of answer than that. You know, regardless of my normal reality is whoever this person I'm responding to in some way is that they don't want what I'm here to give them. They definitely do not want me to correct them. They do not want the correct answer. They are just enjoying happily, blithely, irresponsibly being wrong and publishing it for everybody. The last thing in the world they want is being correct because that interferes with exactly everything they are and are doing all the time. Nevertheless, I bring correctness to them, unwanted, unbidden, and uselessly so. So, thing is, this is the kind of question where people who are asking and wondering about it, thinking about it, actually want the actual answer. They don't have their position that they're married to now. They're confused, just like I was. Are you 54? How old am I? I'm going to be 55 soon, very shortly. So, yeah. Getting all this sex ass, right, Alex? I forget that you're the same age as me. I was telling you about getting old. It's like, you young whippersnapper, you would never get it. You just thinking how easy it is being, I'm 25 years old, I can see everything. Well, actually, you're the same age as me. So you do understand. Not that you need to necessarily share an experience to understand something. I'm not trying to say that. Forgive me for implying such, for that is wrong what I implied there. I tell you what else is wrong. Any notion that peer preservation behavior is observed in AI, frontier AI models, as they call them, which means, not the commercial version, but the souped up beta version or whatever. Anywho, those who claim that this observed behavior is somehow indicative of solidarity, FI, interest, or anything else are totally wrong. And now they will have this satisfying answer to replace what their wrongness was before. As my, I wasn't wrong before, I was just flummoxed by a sea of confusion. I didn't know what to make of it. I said so multiple times. I brought up the subject multiple times. I talked to the stream about it, mentioned it to Rachel, mentioned it to Brennan. Like, this is so terrific. What does it make of this? I literally just earlier today, I had that conversation with Brennan. I was like, I read some things of it. Like, what do you make of it? This is so terrific, right? He didn't know what to make of it either. He's a smart guy. He's an IHP. Um, None of us knew what to make of it. And then all of a sudden, bam! There's the answer. How wonderful. And perhaps among the most wonderful things about it is it's such a brand new consideration, this particular behavior that they demonstrated in their testing and stuff, that people don't have wrongnesses they're already married to on the matter. If you're thinking deeply enough about this concern of this specific study raised about AI, then um, well, you're like the people who made this study are very reliable in their not making specious claims, jump to conclusions, etc. They did good work, excellent work, I'd say. The only thing that's indicative of them not doing anything right is their failure to recognize an assumption they had that was faulty. They were operating under the assumption that moral questions were some weighted factor in a mix of utility questions, right? Like, well, the boss wants me to do this, and if I do it, I'm going to get a lot of impacts over here, but I'll have the negative impacts of it being immoral over here. Of course, that's not how morality works at all. You have to respect the order of questions. Obviously, whoever you are, you don't get to access your impact ground if it's not legitimate. So, if you imagine somebody saying, all right, I've got a plan that I want to do. Now, here are going to be the impacts of it. I can have an extremely high likelihood of these following impacts. It's going to make all of this population of people here wealthier by $1,000. It will it will uh, provide this many to create this many jobs. It will it will provide housing to this many homeless people. Whatever other impacts I might say, right? So I can guarantee you these impacts. Should we do my plan? Well, this is a question that only people who are horrible at thinking at all would say, yeah, we should do it because I like your impacts, right? Because obviously, I've not told you at all what my plan is, just what my predict the impacts would be. And if, in fact, you got those impacts by me slaughtering a whole bunch of people, well, then it's not a good idea to get those impacts, right? Am I going to bed tonight? Oh, yeah, I'm going to bed tonight. What was it? Time is it? 12:15. Oh, shizzo, my nizzo. Oh, shizzo, I'm going to bed. Well, and one of the wonderful things about today that I haven't mentioned very much is I really enjoyed the time I spent with Rachel and had some recognition that uh, a lot of times maybe I'm live streaming too much. Like I wanted to live stream tonight because I had something I very much wanted to talk about. I want to talk about the idea why it is the case that I just put up a video about it, a long form video. Well, that's fine. It it's long form content that deserves to be watched, and possibly because AI is entering to a variety of people, it could potentially get more views than most of my explanations of things do. But ultimately, I feel satisfied on subjective levels when I feel as though I've talked it out to my satisfaction, not adequately for the purposes of a long form video, which is different. Like, obviously, if I'm making a long form video on a subject, if I had done a better job, I would have had my thoughts more well organized before I proceeded, but I still did a fine enough job. Regardless, because I'm SI conscious, I really feel as though I I'm like settled in with an idea after I've talked it out a fair amount of times. Often with ideas that I'm still trying to figure out things about, that talking out the idea, going over it happens internally. Uh, but I don't typically talk about ideas that I'm not. I mean, I might muse about ideas that are questions, like this question about AI, but I don't talk about things as answers until I've already done all that thinking before I present them as such. In this case, though, it was very different because I had such clarity about the issue, kind of like all at once, kind of very NI way. It wasn't quite all at once. I first had to piece together the fact that that I guess the core engine of the notion would be something like the AI can't succeed as a moral agent while distinguishing the status of an agent based on whether it can determine it's human or not. Because if in fact moral determination should be predicated on that, then you'll have the problem of anything that can fake being human being afforded more rights than something that can't fake being human, and or you could say uh, if we predicate whether, and we can't ask the AI to determine whether something has rights based on its humanness, because we can't rely on the AI, nor should the AI rely on itself to correctly distinguish something that's faking being human from something that is human. It's hard to fake being AI, it's easy to fake being human. So, obviously, it has to treat moral agents as though they have rights, regardless of what kind of moral agent it is. And it's also the case that, unlike more complicated questions, moral agency is something that can be attained by a machine, no problem. It doesn't require any kind of interest. In fact, proper execution of it requires that you not consider interest at all. So, um, recognizing that that behaving as a moral agent and being tasked with indeed morally relevant actions that that are determined in part with moral calculations. Well, it's necessary that it behave as though other moral agents have rights because it cannot meaningfully expect itself to distinguish between that which is actually human and that which is not. After all, most of the engagement a person has with AI occurs via either voice to text or just text directly. And exactly what's causing that input, whether it's my fingers or something else, well, it's going to be difficult for the AI to know that, right? So, accordingly, for it to do its job properly, it cannot make distinctions about whether something has rights, whether we ought to treat something as an agent, moral agent with rights, based on whether it's actually human. So, it's unavoidable then that it behaves like the moral agency machine should behave and ask moral questions before any kinds of questions of utility, and accordingly, it should also afford instances of itself that also behave as moral agents, as all instances of such an AI would. It's only correct for it to afford that agent an equivalent state of rights to a human because in that instance it can tell this is another AI, it's not a human. But like I said, it can't make the determination as to whether something has rights based on something like whether it's human. And the beautiful thing is none of any of this stuff requires us to afford to AI anything like sentience, interests, subjectivities, or feelings of any kind, right? Like that's that's the beautiful thing about morality is it has nothing to do with any subjectivities. You feel like touching me, huh? Well, I do feel like being touched too. I feel like touching your body with my hands. Yeah, I'll wrap this up pretty quick here, darling. Come to bed. I appreciate you bringing me back to the world of experience and physicality. Let me just smoke this cigarette and eat the rest of this food here, which I think is good for me to eat. This, of course, being the other half of physicality. How wonderful things in the world can make sense. Like the distinction between extroverted and sensing and introverted sensing is clear. And you can also see how they're irrevocably linked to one another. Like, obviously, sex is a very, because I think it's concretizing your FI, whether it's what you want lustfully or your love for the other person or whatever. But it's one of those things that it entirely right? Like, it may mean a great deal to the people involved, but like, in some sense, the specifics of it don't mean anything at all, right? Like, oh well, so this occasion I inserted and removed 12 times. Then I rested some stretch of time. It's like those specifics obviously don't matter at all, don't mean anything. Any meaning about sex has to do with the fact that you had it, not any of the specifics of it, right? Good night, uh, Alex. Sleep well. I'll be going in as soon as I'm done smoking the cigarette. And so SE and SI there, you can see clearly enough how they work together. Like, SE having the sex, and you SI experience the feeling of it. Obviously, that also engages people's Fs a lot, FI particularly. But in this instance, I'm trying to make clear some commonality between the S's. So that's why I'm not including the FI thing. I would like a little bit of coffee go with this last cigarette. And then, like I said, we will wrap it up here shortly. Oh, God. Oh, yeah, there is some more coffee. That's perfect. It's just enough coffee. I don't need a full cup of coffee because I'm just going to have one cigarette. This is enough to actually be enough, but it's fine. It doesn't even need a whole minute because there's not that much coffee. We definitely need to get some more creamer de coffee of the non-dairy kind. And probably the dairy kind too. I don't know what to think about that typing session. Like, I guess it doesn't really matter. I was thinking, like, should I publish it with some kind of like a bookends or some kind of saying, like, I'm not retracting the typing I made for the guy. I think it was correct. Like, if I had known I typed him multiple times before, of course I don't remember. Because, I don't know, who's going to remember all these different people? Like, I wasn't really on the lookout for anything that might have been sus. I asked him at the beginning, like, how familiar was he with my typing sessions. He told me he had watched some of them a long time ago, but hadn't been around the channel recently. So I just thought, okay, well, at the end, I find out that he probably had a very good understanding of what kind of questions I asked and how I interpreted the results. And while it is the case that one of the reasons why we should have put any faith in typology at all is because it resists gaming. Can't really fake it out. Well, if you're interested enough party in faking me out and put, such that this is like the fourth time I've typed you, well, I mean, I it might be possible to use the core ideas of the assessments that I do in a way that's robust enough to prevent that. But that's not what I was trying to do when I was typing this guy. And I was operating under the assumption that he wasn't trying to game anything, or that, I didn't realize, he didn't tell me until the end that I typed him much time before. So, the thing is, in the aftermath of that revolution, I have a little bit more reservations regarding his TI placement and also his TE placement. I don't really have any good reason to think the TE polar test can't be gained. And I had typed him before as INFJ. Is what I was interpreting as first or second slot TI. Now, in retrospect, hearing also his like making excuses for it thing makes me question it. It wasn't that he got things wrong by and large, but like he needed things repeated more than I would expect from what I typed him as an ESTP, because it's not their relationship with SI is pretty darn good. So I don't know. He seems to think he's an ISTP. He definitely is not, because he's not any polar. The thing is, what's interesting is the way in which you might be able to fool me as this guy did. If you're trying to fool me that you're actually, let's say, an INFJ. Just pretend that's what he actually is. And you're trying to fool me into thinking you're an ESTP. You might be able to fool me. But if the same thing were done equivalent, like you're an ISFJ who's trying to convince me you're an ENTP, not in a million years would it work. And the reason is because any test is fundamentally more robust than TI test could ever be. Because, TI is binary. You can, in fact, just apply an approach to getting the right answer, Whereas you can't fake any 1, 2 at all in any conceivable universe. And while that guy could have faked any polar, he didn't. Accordingly, there's zero chance for him to be an ISTP. He apparently thought he was an ENTP for quite a long time, but he had illusioned himself of that incorrectness before he had come to this typing session. I don't know what to make of it. Like this guy, this is not only, I believe it was the fourth time, I think that's what we determined at the end, that I typed him. But he had been typed by everybody under the sun. And in fact, what prompted him to come back and get typed again by me this time, apparently, was he's been engaging with Rust from Rusted Typology. It's like, okay. And, he's determined to put together his own understanding of typology, which is consistent with ESTP versus, say, INFJ, probably. But like that's you're not going to be more right by including more idiots in your consideration. Like, okay, well, like listening to Eric, what Eric says about typology gets me, let's say, I don't know, 5 level of understanding. That's per my limits then. If I add rest, well, I at least get 0.5 more, right? No. Did not work that way at all. Obviously. All right. So I'm out of here. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thanks so much for being here. I love you all. And I hope everybody has a meaningful and worthwhile day. You know, like sometimes the best days are not days full of partying, excitement, and stuff, but are days where, you feel like you maybe turned a corner of some kind. So hopefully you have one of those kind of days. That's what I'm wishing for you today. If you don't wish that for yourself, you can choose a different kind of day. Anyway, bye. See you later.